Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Nicolas Guarino, CEO and founder of Naturae. Thank you very much for joining me today, Nicolas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Nicolas, do you prefer Nicolas, Nick?
Nick's fine. Yeah, Nick's easier.
Okay. Well, Nick, I always like to start with a little bit of background. So how was it that you got involved in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I mean, I got involved right out of college, essentially. My family's worked in agriculture for a few generations now, and specialty agriculture, and I've been an avid consumer since I was very young, really. So I was always drawn to it, and I happened to kind of be in the right place at the right time. Arguably not, though. I mean, 6 years later, it's starting to seem that way. But New York opened up like their non-psychoactive cannabinoid program. They called it the Hemp Research Pilot Program. And we got licensed for it. And I was getting out of business school. I mean, really, I was in business school to go back to the family farm and formalize some of the structure over there, because we had a family business and it definitely needed some formalization. And I found myself in a situation where we got the license to cultivate and process, manufacture CBD products, essentially was the focus at that time. And we went fundraising for it. And at the time, the cannabis space, I would say, was very generous with their funding. It was much easier to find money back then than it is now. And we were lucky enough to be able to raise the money for the project and sort of build an infrastructure for really, like, our focus was really cannabis processing and in the CBD days. That's the DNA of the company. It's always been extracting oil out and wholesaling that oil. And that's changed dramatically now on the adult use side because of the other parts of the business that we're compelled to get into. But yeah, so it was just the timing really worked out, and I was in business school and we learned so much about fundraising. It was New York as well, so New York is kind of a capital of fundraising in the world, and we're able to do that. And just I think we were a lot more confident than we are now. We've been humbled quite a bit over the past 5 or 6 years.
What's very young?
When we started the company, I was 22.
Oh, sorry. Very young when you first started using cannabis.
13 or 14, something like that.
Okay. It's fair.
I mean, not 8.
Yeah. You're not in the single digits. You're all right. So your pedigree is 4 generations of agriculture. Was it all in cannabis agriculture?
No, not at all, actually. It was actually livestock. So, I mean, for the past, for quite a few generations, it was just regular beef, livestock, like commodity style. And then for the past 30 or 40 years, it's been water buffalo dairy production. And water buffalo is just a very special animal to have to deal with, and working on the genetics to increase yields for dairy. There's a ton of crossover in between quite a few of the specialty agriculture industries. But I will say, we had very little experience with cannabis, right, other than consuming it. And so we, at that time, what we did was just start reaching out to companies in legal states. And really back then it was like Oregon and California and Colorado that we could reach out to. And we made some good friends in Oregon. And since we had the license in hand for cultivation, we're still waiting for the processing license. We just asked if we could go work at the farm. And we kind of told the story of what we were trying to do in New York. And this company, the Boring Hemp Company in Boring, Oregon, sort of took us under their wing. And we got to hang out there for an extended period of time, work on the harvest, work in the greenhouses. And then they took us to their processor as well. And that's where we really got inspired. And we thought, we want to have a processing facility, something like this. And yeah, so that was, I mean, it was essentially thanks to a bunch of other people in the industry that have worked for decades and them just very openly and freely exchanging information back and forth. And of course, also a lot of people in the industries are still learning every day right now because everything's so new in terms of processes, in terms of improvements with solvent lists and et cetera. So, yeah, it was really just teaching ourselves and calling people, and equipment manufacturers did a really good job at teaching us really hard lessons by claiming much higher throughputs than what was possible, and those big contrasts with equipment. I mean, I would say in the CBD days, I learned more about equipment than I probably ever will in the future of my life. I mean, it really was like a master's or a doctorate in working with manufacturing, processing, and even some lab equipment as well. Yeah.
How did you come up with the idea of almost an apprenticeship style where you went over to Boring, Oregon, to learn kind of boots on the ground? How did that concept come to mind?
I think, well, mainly because we were trying to put together our business plan to fundraise, and there's so many technical details that we couldn't like to get to some kind of revenue projection that we were going to think about. There's no way to, I mean, we at the time even struggled understanding like yields from biomass to, to the different stages of oil that you get depending on the extraction method that you're using. So there is a lot of very low-hanging fruit and basic stuff that we just needed to see either by working the actual process or by being lucky enough to have people that just wanted to talk on the phone with us for 30 minutes or 40 minutes and just school us on what they knew,
Okay. What were some of the missteps that you had along the way on the CBD side when it came to equipment?
So with CBD, I would say the number one and most important one, which translates then interestingly into adult use, was we decided to go with CO2 extraction for CBD distillate because not a lot of people understood anything about how the CBD market was going to develop at that point. And our logic behind it really was we're gonna focus on quality. I've tried ethanol extracted distillate and I've tried CO2 extracted distillate, and there's the flavor is better, right? Like there's a sort of very rancid kind of taste that I've found in ethanol extracted distillate. So we're going to focus on quality, and it was a terrible bet because the throughput's much lower. The equipment, the capex is much higher. I mean, it was like a $800,000 piece of equipment to extract basically 1/5 at best, 1/5 of what an ethanol rig could do that costs also 1/5 of that, to about $200,000 or $150,000. So, but our bet was on quality, and we got some customers that swore by our distillate, and they kind of kept us running, at least paying, even if not paying ourselves, like paying some bills during the very tough years of CBD, where they said, we'll only take these guys' distillate and we'll pay a premium for it. But the vast majority of the market, let's say like 99% of the market, had no interest in the quality of distillate at all in CBD because the game was about isolate. So most of the buyers of distillate were further processors that were going to create isolate with it. And to them, the game was just how many milligrams of THC is in your oil, because in the end, I'm creating this 99% purified powder. It doesn't matter. Nothing pro or against that. I think isolate has its place in the market, but that's just how it turned out. And so trying to charge a premium, there was no one in the industry that was paying premiums for oil. There was such a massive supply that price just went down. So getting a CO2 machine back then, definitely a mistake. We struggled for 5 years with it. Now in the adult use side, we're very happy that we have it. I think if I could have gone back though, I would have had an ethanol machine, made money in CBD, and then maybe switched over if I would have had a crystal ball. And then I think another very big mistake that you can almost extend to equipment, but its infrastructure, was a very big greenhouse that we built that we spent almost $500,000 on. And that was, we actually ended up selling that property already in 2021, thankfully, but it had a lot of technical issues with the local climate here for cultivating inside of a greenhouse. It used a massive cooling tunnel that created a lot of humidity, and New York is already a very humid climate. So that it was rendered useless essentially, outside of just for seedling production, for the clone or seedling production. That was a tough one. I mean, and then smaller ones in processing, I have many. I mean, we've purchased 3-stage filtration, bag filtration devices that didn't work with our CO2 oil because it was too thick. As we speak right now, we're testing a membrane filtration machine to do filtration at a much finer level to get higher quality distillate out. And we've been struggling with that now for about 6 weeks. We just want to get we want to be able to consistently yield above 90% THC distillate, and that's only made possible if you can get into the 0.001 microns. If you're not removing the sugars and a bunch of other things that are in there, your distillate quality is not going to go up. So I don't know if that one's a mistake yet.
Okay.
We're going to find out. Yeah. Then there's been all other pieces of, sorry, go ahead.
No. There's been other pieces. Go ahead.
No, there's been other pieces of equipment that have been fantastic. You know, like we got an ATG vape filler, and that machine does more than what they even told us that it would do. We're looking at bringing in a leafy pack bag filler, which is just a wayhead for edibles and vape bagging automatically. It's a shout out Leafy Pack. It's a cool company. That looks so. I think more and more, as you get into the manufacturing equipment, you can get more accurate information from your suppliers, and they tend to be more established suppliers. But when you go back one step into the post-processing or raw extraction of the biomass, whether it be frozen or dry biomass, there's just a lot more room for mistake. There's a lot of options, and most of them don't work, basically. Yeah.
When you made the choice for CO2 extraction in the CBD market, were you too pot committed to make a switch or bring ethanol in, or why did you decide to stay the course?
I would say primarily financial reasons. Like we had an initial raise and the market tanked, and then it was very difficult to attempt to raise for a market where, like, on a month by month basis, the price of the commodity was going down. So we had many plans presented, and we brought to the board a lot of things like, look, we can sell this CO2 machine that we got for 800 for 250 with the right client, and we can bring in ethanol, and we can at least pump volume. But I think in hindsight, it would have probably still been a mistake, because the pricing got to a point where our facility, our infrastructure here, wouldn't be able to compete with some of the extractors in Colorado, especially Colorado. I mean, California as well, but especially Colorado, in the CBD game. I mean, there's some facilities out there that have gotten to a point that they're almost like refineries. You know, I mean, they're producing 1,000 kilograms a day, and then the question there becomes, like, who can possibly consume that, right? And so it's over. I keep thinking there's going to be a point where, like, okay, finally this break happens in hemp, and price starts to recover because enough companies go out of business. But it is like a slow death over there. I mean, it's a tough market.
Is that the reason that it seems like you've been experimenting with different types of equipment now that adult use is in play? Is that because so that way you don't kind of fall into a similar trap where you're kind of like tied to one technology?
No, I would say that the answer is actually that with CBD, the product form factors were not often like vapable, and so the potency of the distillate wasn't super relevant. Like, it was going to be put into a lotion, into a tincture, into an edible, and now distillate potency has become critical, and it's actually much more difficult than we were expecting for it to be, because it also influences it with the strains that come in and what kind of minor cannabinoid profile they have. Consumer doesn't care. The consumer wants to see 90% plus THC, period. But no, we're experimenting with it because now the big change for us is that we're not just wholesalers of kilograms of oil. We have our own in-house brands, and they have finished products that go to consumers. And we just have to improve the inputs that we're providing. We used to provide inputs to another factory that was just going to refine it further. Now we're providing inputs to the manufacturer, which in this case is ourselves, but it needs to be further refined than the work that we were doing with CBD.
When you purchased the greenhouse, was the idea that you were going to be a fully vertically integrated company?
Yeah, that was from the beginning with CBD. It was we were going to be fully vertically integrated, and we even had our own in-house brand there as well. But obviously, with the volume of production that we had, we just had to go into the wholesale market. And then it was a year and a half or two in, we realized the wholesale market was the only place to have sort of a steady revenue stream coming there. So we really went deep into that, and then with adult use coming online, we had to stop again. Look at, okay, for all the scale that we have big solvent recovery machines. We have a lot of big equipment, and we looked at the New York adult use market where, rather than selling a kilo for $50, you can commercialize a kilo for $25,000 or $30,000. And we're like 10 or 15 times X the required capacity, right? So we had to dial all the processes back, and it was sort of like a whole relearning experience. Like, how do we do this again at a smaller scale and at the quality that we need for the in-house brands for the finished products?
Are you all adult use now, or do you still do work in CBD?
We're 99.9% adult use now. I mean, we have some products in the adult use in our portfolio that have CBD, like 1-to-1s. So we still will extract with one of the farms that we've been working with for years. We'll extract a bit of oil to have like on reserve, but we don't trade CBD, or we don't produce it to sell it. We're just it's a very tough market. Yeah.
What was that transition like internally as New York came online and you made that decision where all of a sudden so much more money was sort of on the table?
Initially it was very, very exciting for sure. I mean, let's say when that moment was coming at the company, we had stopped, we had to let go of all of our staff and team members, and it was really just 4 partners physically at the office every day, running the equipment, because we wanted to keep our split contracts that we had committed to. So we were running the equipment, doing all the extraction, and working 14-hour days every single day, Saturday, Sunday, all of it. And so when that came, it was incredibly exciting, because we also had kept the relationships with our farms, and we knew that they were going to get their license, and it was all kind of going to come together. And then, I mean, it was also super challenging, I guess. That was the point that I was getting at there, because it was just 4 of us left. Like, any structure of a real functioning company had really dwindled, and so we had to sort of restart up. I mean, it really was like a new startup. We had to. I mean, I remember we spent 2 or 3 weeks cleaning out our facility, with the tooth just everywhere, with the toothbrush on the walls, everything. We cleaned it up. We painted the walls. We sort of were like, okay, this is going to be a new start. And then from there, we did all the initial extractions ourselves, and made all the initial batches of product when we first got them into stores in January. Probably by like end of February, we started to actually hire staff. So it's super exciting, but definitely very challenging, because then the other part to add to it is we were 4 guys working on putting 1 kilo jars in a box and shipping them via UPS, right? UPS just showed up and picked the stuff up, and it was gone, and we got paid COD. We weren't shipping anything out without getting paid COD. So now we added manufacturing of a whole variety of products, 3 different categories of products. We added solventless extraction because we saw it as a necessity for the portfolio to have solventless. Plus, we had frozen like 10,000 pounds of material, so we needed to have solventless one way or another. And then we added an edibles kitchen. And so it's just been a ton of training. I feel like just now in September and August and September, we're just starting to see each one of the teams. The edibles team is coming in and reporting, hey, what we were able to do at 5 p.m., we just finished at 1 p.m. We're actually probably going to double our efficiency. So we're starting to see all of that bear fruit, but it's been a ton of training, new equipment, and a lot of like stopping and starting as well, because of obviously the market conditions here and the retail side have been impossible to predict. So I mean, yeah, it's a whole new startup, super exciting, and with a bunch of baggage that we were carrying, but I think it was very exciting.
When was that restart? That was September of last year?
For us, it was November. That's another
Okay.
big challenge. Our documents got like lost by the OCM for our licensing, and we had to just drill them until finally in November we were one of the last processing license. Even though we were one of the first CBD, we were one of the last like adult use processing licenses, or 28 out of 40. But yeah, we got that in November of 22 officially, right? Like we spent all of 2022 though. This is another relevant part to the startup story, because a lot of West Coast companies wanted to do licensing deals here in New York and get into the market. We spent that whole year visiting all of those facilities, looking at their products and thinking about like what portfolio would we build with an in-house brand. And unfortunately, a bunch of those deals just didn't come to fruition because both sides just couldn't come to agreement at the end. But it was all of 2022 preparing, and then in November we got the license.
Okay. How would you describe the current state of cannabis in New York?
Um, I would say it's I guess disastrous. You know, it's not doing well now, especially for the all of the current licensees. I mean, when you ask that question, I hesitate a little bit because we just sort of got a reset yesterday where the OCM said on October 4th, we're going to release new licensing across the board. There shouldn't be any more lawsuits that slow this down. And we're maybe going to get some retail licensees that come in with some funding, which means they can be a little bit faster to market. Um, I think the easiest way to answer that is, you know, like Missouri is doing 100 to 120 million dollars a month in sales. Maine is doing 80 million, 100 million. You have all these states much smaller, like a fourth of the population, doing 10 or 20 times the sales that New York is doing. So it's in a very distressed state, and most of the operators that made a lot of bets were coming out of that same place that we were at, four people just trying to make it work with a ton of debt already from CBD. And then there's going to be a bunch of people that don't survive or that have already told me I didn't plant this season because there's no point, there's nothing to do, or even worse, I did and now there's an injunction. And I have nobody to contract my material. I mean, we've had to reduce our material contracting by like 80%. We had 8 farms and now we've got 2, and one of those is our cultivation license anyway. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a massive market. There's a ton of opportunity. I think there were the best of intentions by all sides, but it was botched pretty badly. Yeah.
Are you going to be able to make it through this sort of disaster patch? And do you see kind of like greener pastures ahead?
It depends on how long it takes. Like we need 50 stores to be open. In our personal case, we need 50 stores to be open to really have critical mass with our brands and reach profitability. So if it takes more than 6 months, you know, I'm gonna do everything I can, obviously, and look in every direction, and hopefully I do come up with something. But if it takes more than 6 months, it's gonna be very tough for us, and it's gonna be very tough for a lot of people in the industry for sure. To get to that 50 store count. I mean, they really need to open at least another 30, 40 stores by like January, February of 24, or you know, I don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, they're just gonna keep. I mean, nothing magical is gonna happen. They're just gonna keep losing the original guys that made all the bets right now, and new guys will come in and replace them. Because to your second part of your question, it's a massive market, and there are greener pastures ahead. I mean, it is a very big market. I think it's a market that has more tendencies towards wanting to buy in the legal side. With the population, you can see that by how many people travel to Massachusetts, hour and a half, at least in all of the upstate and western region, to get their weed. So I think it has massive potential, and I think there will be greener pastures ahead. It's just like who can navigate and find the right investors without having to let go of their entire company, if there are any investors, because again, right now that's very tough with cannabis. A lot of people have been burnt with it. So yeah, but there will be greener pastures ahead for somebody. I don't know if, I mean, for yeah, for some people. Yeah.
Is part of the problem or part of the equation sort of a lack of regulation around the illicit market or non-licensed businesses?
It's part of it for sure. It's part of it, and It's part of it, but it would be easier to have that conversation if we had like 100 stores and every geographic location in the state had access to buy legal. Since we're so far from that, and some of the key areas like Long Island, Brooklyn, just have zero legal stores. It's sort of like it could be a problem. I think New York is a very strong enforcement state. I personally in the past have used a lot of the unlicensed stores before we had legal stores, and I go back to them to buy my nicotine vapes. And flavors are banned here in New York. But fuck it, there's always people that are gonna have it somewhere. So I have frequent interactions with these shops that sell this stuff. And I have noticed, like in all of the surrounding areas of any kind of dispensary, let's say I'm on a distribution run and I run out to go get my vape, I'll go in and I'm noticing that none of them have even Delta 8 products anymore. They don't carry any psychoactive products because they're coming in and they're getting fined very heavily. So I genuinely have confidence that with a combination of accessibility and the enforcement and laws that are already going on, it's going to be a matter of time for New York. There's just not the same legacy culture that California has. Like people here just want convenience, safe products. They don't, and on time as well. Like, so yeah, that's my thought. I think it's going to be less of a challenge in New York once we have stores.
So you have a GMP certified facility in Hoosick Falls. Was it GMP certified previously, or was that part of the reset?
It was actually. We at some point in CBD, we were making an effort to do exporting of distillate to Brazil, and Anvisa, which is like the FDA for Brazil, required you to have GMP, and you had to have GMP by NSF, the National Sanitation Foundation, which is kind of like one of the hardest certifiers to go through for an audit, or auditors, excuse me. And so anyway, we went through that process with NSF. It was grueling. It was very tough, but we got lucky because it was COVID times and the audit was all virtual. So I think we were able to learn a bunch during that audit and still pass it, because I guess the context there is New York made it a requirement to have GMP in hemp days already. You already had to have GMP during the last 2 years of hemp, and people who didn't have GMP with hemp weren't qualified to even get adult use in the first place. Like you had to have it by a certain time, blah, blah, blah. So we got our first year of GMP in 2020. Then I think in 2022, we repeated or 2021, we did NSF again. And then in 2022, right now for adult use, there was a big reset to it because we added a ton of manufacturing. So there was just so many more processes that we had to create sanitation logs for, that we had to do. I mean, I'm not going to start talking out of my ass because I'm not the GMP guy, but every new process just involved a whole bunch of work on the third audit that we had. So it was definitely the toughest audit. And before we were certified to make ingredients, now we had to be certified to make finished products, right? So that was a big difference.
Did you see any of your peers kind of push against being GMP certified?
Honestly, no. There wasn't like a collective push or a lot of no.
Okay.
And that could have something to do with just like how historical manufacturing is in New York, and just generally people having an expectation that there's going to be some stringent certification you have if it's consumable by humans. But no. Most people were kind of most of the production guys, let's say, that I talked to at, like, I don't know, Beacon Skiff, any of the other processors, were like, this is going to be good because it'll give us some rules that we like have to follow at least. But yeah.
Right now, you're the largest producer of CO2 extracted cannabis oils in New York. Is CO2 extraction still your preferred method of extraction? And do you see that shifting at all now that you have solventless and other technologies in house?
For distillate production, CO2 is gonna remain our choice, and then it goes into what products are you making and what audience are you talking to and what effects are you looking for, because I think distillate and like live rosin are very different, even for different occasions. At least for me, like I can consume distillate throughout the day, but if I smoke rosin throughout the day, I'm very cloudy. So I think there's a place for each one. And CO2 for us is the highest quality distillate, and we kind of already have it in place and are super familiar with it. So we wouldn't replace it. and this machine is capable of extracting more than I think than the market share that we'll be able to take in the New York market with our products. We're not looking to get into wholesale at all. So I don't see us having like a throughput issue with it. We like the quality. We're familiar with extracting with it. We'll probably keep it. We are doing a lot of work with our solventless, primarily at the farms. Like we have our solventless extraction method is down because we have Alex Kupamil. He's a gentleman from California. He founded Critical Concentrates, and he's been working in hydrocarbon and solventless just for years and years, since like 2005. Ton of accolades. I won't go through all of them, but he knows his shit really well. And so he implemented our solventless process and taught us like step by step what to do. And of course, he was just here, so we've seen like some people have veered from his process, and we've immediately seen the color changes. So we're learning still in the solventless room for sure with him, but because we have him, we have the process there down. It's really at the farms that we're trying to make sure that we get the input that we need, which is challenging outdoors and having our farms so fragmented. But yeah, so that's really the work in solventless. And I would say we're gonna stick to CO2 distillate. What we're really debating right now is it worthwhile for us to add hydrocarbon, because it was always in the plans to have all three forms of extraction, so that we could get the full menu of extract based products, including diamonds, including some of the things that butane can produce. But we're seeing that the market really loves live rosin. Like solventless really is what's kind of going forward. And so to have such a dangerous operation that requires a lot of manual labor with hydrocarbon, it's starting to seem more and more like we're just going to focus on getting better and better inputs for our solventless, have CO2 feeding our distillate based brand, and then have solventless feeding our connoisseur higher level quality brand.
Well, speaking of your brand, how did you make Jaunty the top seller in New York?
It's a combination of three things. I mean, I would say number one, at the dispensary level, who's our first tier of client, we've been incredibly flexible with our delivery and distribution. And we guarantee right now next day delivery anywhere in the state. And so I think the stores know that if anything's getting close to running out of stock, that we're just a phone call away, and we're happy to make the delivery very, very quickly. That has been massive for sure. We came in with very competitive pricing because we structured our product to have a margin. And to your point earlier about the unlicensed market, to be as close to the unlicensed market as we could be. Like Jaunty, especially, which was started with our vapes, it's a form factor that I consume, and I know that if I had to pay $100 for a 1 gram vape, I just wouldn't be able to afford my consumption habit. So form factor comes into it, and the competitiveness and price that we came out with it. And then finally, like it's a CO2 distillate product, like it's a high quality product. So I think in the Reddit forums, it was actually funny. Like you would see people saying like, how is the CO2 extracted distillate the cheapest product in the market right now, or the lowest priced product in the market right now? It must be that CO2 is just low quality, right? Like if the consumer doesn't know, their perception is just, and then they would taste it and they'd say like, I don't know what these guys are doing, but like, this is great, or like, so yeah, you have the right price and you have high quality, it's going to be a popular product, especially against the backdrop of no offense to anyone, everybody's had their own models, but against the backdrop of very expensive other products all throughout there. And finally, the third thing is the brand and the marketing. I mean, I think it's great. I think we just launched a V2. I think that the colors are super attractive. I think it resonates with people with the flavor that they're looking for. It's a fun brand, and it draws attention in the stores. So yeah, the marketing push and really making sure that we're well displayed in stores has also obviously played a factor. And yeah, I think those three things pretty much cover it.
Where did the marketing acumen come from?
Christian Malika. So he's our chief revenue officer and partner in the company as well now. And he was with us from about end of 2021. So this is his second year that he's been with the company. He came from wine and spirits. but just like a super, super creative guy. And he was in wine and spirits. Then he worked in cannabis in California for like 4 years or 3 or 4 years, something like that. And then he came back and was working with us. But just super creative guy, passionate about building the brand. I mean, he's our sales guy as well. And it's often like, hey, remember, we got to do some sales as well. I mean, he's just so into it, and it's really become his little baby. Jaunty and Resonators is the other one that he put out, which is the live rosin solventless brand. And also like speed, like we were also very quick with it. We were happy enough with a version 1, but always knowing that like a version 2 is coming in 3 months, and a version 3 will come in hopefully 5 or 6 months, and a version 4. I don't know if I can take the liberty to pull this up.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can see up here already like a version 1 at the top, and a version 2 with quite a few improvements. And that version 2 was finished like in June, and we were just able to release it. And we already have the version 3 ready to go. So it's I think it's a bunch of iteration. Like you just have to throw it at the wall, make it good enough to go out there, and then instantly be itching to think like what else could we improve on it. And that's, everything from getting inspiration from a bunch of other brands that are out there that already have massive marketing budgets to iterating internally between everybody and just saying, no, I don't like this, I disagree, blah 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 blah.
Well, to create a high-end product, you need high-end input materials. And I've heard you mention them a couple of times regarding your relationships with farms and the materials that you're bringing in-house. What is that vetting process like, and how do you maintain that consistent level of quality?
For the inputs, I would say we're just developing the vetting process this year. Like last year, it was really, we were working with all of the farms that we had already spent years working with in CBD, and we got very different inputs, let's say, from all 8 of those farms, in very different qualities. And we've now had to hone in and focus this year. But the most critical part to the process of ensuring those inputs is having really good reference with the genetics, right? I mean, thankfully, all of the farms right now are very trained on cultivating cannabis, just generally planting it and maintaining it in the fields, because they've been doing it for years with feminized hemp. So it's really providing the proper genetics, and then ensuring the harvest is done correctly, depending on if you're looking for frozen or dry biomass. And so in those 2 points, we provide a ton of support. Like we provide all the genetics, and then during harvest, we provide all the labor for the harvest, and we're in charge of ensuring that the harvest is done per spec. As this third season comes around, we're starting to meet more and more farmers that will be able to take that on themselves on the harvest side, and we really will be able to let go of that. But it's just kind of a matter of time of finding the right partners and people who have been able to properly staff their farm and have infrastructure in their farm and et cetera. But yeah, controlling the genetics and the harvest is the biggest thing.
How did you provide the labor?
I'm actually from Venezuela originally, and so I've got a lot of Latin family here in New York, and so we get a lot of temp workers, a lot of Spanish temp workers that come for harvest time, especially on weekends. Like that's one of the challenges we have. Thankfully, we have very small fields, but we generally try to make harvest pushes work from like Thursday to Sunday. And we'll do a very big push. We'll have 24 people on a 1 acre field harvesting. So yeah, it's hourly temp labor.
Okay. What are your future expansion plans? I mean, and kind of continuing to pursue full vertical integration.
I would say so. We really, I think the way that we're going to be able to stay competitive is staying focused only on the extract-based products that we can pull from outdoor cultivation, which is low-cost cultivation, and stay away from like the other 50% of the market, right? The pre-rolls and the smokable flower. And so right now, like with the facility that we own outright, we have a potential in extract-based products to make $50 to $60 million a year in wholesale sales of product. So I guess the answer is like I need New York to expand first, and then when we start hitting those numbers, those are very big numbers to us. I mean, we've not been close to that yet as a company. So when we start getting closer to those numbers, the expansion is going to be focused first on our edibles kitchen, which needs to have more flexibility, or have more space so we can add more flavors, have more capacity. And then maybe hydrocarbon. That's what I'm saying, that we're still kind of going back and forth on. But on like distillate and hash and rosin production, we have a lot of runway. And on vapes and tinctures, we have a lot of runway. So it'll be edibles. If it's justified, it'll be edibles that maybe we do another kitchen with.
Okay. What has been, because you recently launched new gummy and tincture product lines, what has the feedback been?
It's been super positive actually. Especially on the new hash gummies that we released. We were so pleased with that. I mean, we made that product based on like our own experience eating edibles. Myself, Christian, Connor, our COO. And we tried some products from Massachusetts called Hashables. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're a hash gummy, same thing. And we were all like, wow, this high is incredible. Is it really this different with hash? And sure enough, it was. So that product was super well received. We have a killer cook in the kitchen who loves playing with flavors, and so she did this like flawless sour green apple. The sanding on it was perfect. I was super happy with the gummy products. And then the tincture products, we weren't planning on actually making tincture products. That was what kept us alive during CBD. It was tinctures and thousands of tinctures that I personally filled. And we were like, that's a saturated thing. In our heads, it just didn't even exist. And stores started calling us and they were like, hey, do you guys have tinctures by chance? And we were like, well, we actually have a brand called Jumbo Dose from CBD that we worked so hard on. And now we can just bring it right back to life under the adult use. And so we did like this effect focused tincture line, which has different minor cannabinoids. I guess it's the line that like most talks to all the history that we have with the CBD world. And the feedback on that has been way better than we expected. And the volume of it has also been way higher than we expected. I mean, we thought maybe those products would sell a few units per week in a store, and they're selling a few units per day. So we're excited about it. That's the one that I would say I'm the most like wary of, and I'm seeing how tinctures will perform in the future, because I think there might be like an initial hype about them and then they'll go down. But gummies have been performing way better than we could have even imagined overall as a category. And the vapes, of course, are doing great. Yeah.
How did you decide to go at the gummy market? And once you did, how did you make the choices in terms of the equipment that you brought in-house to make your kitchen?
We had gone to in 2022, we had gone to a lot of different facilities in the West Coast, in Oklahoma, in California, in Colorado. And we'd kind of seen this setup just repeated over and over in all the different places. So we're like, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. But before we bought all of the equipment, one of the equipment providers, Truffley Made, offered like an $8,000 consulting package where they claimed that they would get you from, A to Z on manufacturing gummies at scale with their depositor. And so we got that. And, sometimes you get very lucky with consultants and with those kinds of packages, because it was fantastic. I mean, the chef from Truffley Made flew out to our facility for 3 or 4 days. We discussed the whole design, what equipment we should get and shouldn't get, and where we'd be making a mistake in terms of all the supporting equipment, curing room size, humidity inside the curing room, temperature inside the curing room, curing time. We had a critical mistake there with some of our assumptions, because we thought it was only 24 hours and really there's 2 cure periods, so it's 48 hours. If there would have been 150 stores, that would have been a problem. Thankfully, it hasn't become a problem yet. And then with all of the processes, I've actually been the one trained on them, and then with Connor, our COO, right alongside of me, and we lead the process ourselves a few times so that we can really understand like what can we expect the output to be here. And then after that, like Connor is a master at getting people trained on it. So So I would say it was a process of like from the day we decided we wanted to enter gummies to that we had gummies in the market, it was about 10 weeks, probably eight
Oh,
to
wow.
10 weeks. Like at 8 weeks, we were testing product anyway. And our first tests came back like at 10 milligrams as well. So we got lucky with a bunch of stuff there too. But yeah, the answer was bringing in outside help for sure.
Why do you decide to do all the training on the equipment and the processes yourself initially?
Because CB, I think it's a little bit of post-traumatic stress from CBD, right? Just like having all these sheets made and these expectations as to what revenue is going to be based on this investment made on a piece of equipment, and it always being just wildly off, and having these moments where like you thought it was off because of this, but it turns out that wasn't even close. The supplier wasn't being communicated to properly that the moisture in the biomass was 12%, and what's happening is that the condenser is freezing up, whatever the problem may be. And so if I can just understand it fundamentally, then I can in my head understand like how the whole org chart should work and sort of interact with each other and communicate with each other. Because again, we're like in super startup mode. So it's not like to micromanage. I'm always very like positive, and I'm allowing everybody else to have input on the process. But I just want to be there because I feel like if not, I don't know what's going on in the back. And if I don't know what's going on in the back, like too many surprises. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I guess I wasn't asking with a micromanaging sort of angle. I was thinking more, sometimes when people get into the C-suite or upper management, sometimes there are issues because they kind of lose sight of what's happening on the floor.
Yeah. That's exactly the reason. That's exactly the reason to really stay connected to the day-to-day. Because there's in our management team after CBD, and then after watching so many big companies fail in recreational cannabis in other states, there's a constant fear of like we have to be missing something. And if you're gonna claim you're gonna have X margin, and you can really claim that the only way as a manufacturing company is that everybody's working like a machine, right? That the production is being done so that many units were made that day and under that labor cost. That's real. That's actually something that we can say we have a 30% margin net. That's what we're targeting. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it seems it's awesome. I mean, it seems required to me, and I think the B answer to all of that is that I do have to be reminded to like get the hell out of there, because it's so tempting to just work on processes and machines and equipment, and there's like a lot of other higher level stuff that is sitting back there waiting for you, and you're like, no, let me just fill another 2,000 gummy bags and then we'll get to that. So you have to balance that for sure. Yeah.
You had mentioned a couple of times being humbled. Were you humbled more when you were working in CBD or humbled more in adult use?
I mean, more in CBD, just because we're less experienced. I'd say we've been able to plan a lot more for the adult use side.
Okay.
And things have just become way simpler because it's just ultimately all boiled down to margin. And when you can just bring it down to that, and then each component that takes away from margin, it's just become simpler to sort of plan things out with experience, I suppose. But we're still getting humbled here then, like on the marketing side, like on the new businesses that we had to take on. Like, sure, we can do well in cultivation and extraction and manufacturing even, but with the marketing and sales, yeah, we're getting humbled. So to that question, I don't know, just getting humbled in different places just as much, because you go into some store and you see a brand that put in a beautiful display and you're like, holy shit, we're nowhere near that. Like, we're going to need to up our level on our displays. We're going to need to, so on the sales front, and then I hope I start to get humbled on the distribution front. Like, so far it's been very easy. And we have very good plans for it up to like 200 stores, but distribution and sales or distribution and marketing are going to be the two places where, we have work to do.
Is the plan to stay the course in New York until it kind of comes fully online, or do you have your eye on other states where you could potentially expand?
No, definitely. Like, have you read about like True Leave and like them going super deep into Florida? And we like that model of True Leave, and then we want to steal the model from DTI of like the nice house of brands that they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely go very, very deep into New York. I think it's such a massive market and there's infinite amounts of works to be done, and we don't have such a big team. So we can't spread ourselves into other states for a long time. I mean, suppose if somebody came and was like, wow, Jaunty is so beautiful, I just want to give it shelf space in California, and here we'll pay you a royalty. Like I'd look at the deal, but like we're not going to go and actively try to expand the brand to a bunch of states.
So you were recently named one of MJ Ventures 40 under 40. How did you respond to that accolade?
I thought it was very generous, honestly. I don't think, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I should respond to it. I don't know if I should be very positive or like kind of how I feel, but I thought it was very nice to see up there, and it was great to see the recognition. And then at the same time, I feel like we have a ton of work to do still before that feels real. So maybe a bit of like imposter syndrome there with that one. But I mean, it's definitely nice. It's definitely nice.
At any point, did you wish you were back in the water buffalo milk game?
Actually quite often. Not back in it, but I want to get back in it one day. I feel like this industry has been so challenging, and from so many different angles, regulatory, pricing, et cetera, all the different parts that we have to cover as well, that one day I would like to have a simpler business where it's just like, this can go to any store and I can just knock the door and be like, hey, you want my high quality cheese? You know what I mean? I mean, I think about it for sure. I don't know that, but I don't know that will be possible. We'll see how long it takes in New York and how that business is doing in the future. And yeah, we'll see.
Does your family see you as like a pioneer in a new agricultural space?
Yeah, I guess a little bit, and especially because it's cannabis, they think it's very interesting and it's very cool, right? And they're always sharing articles around and stuff. I mean, I think so. I think there's like and my cousin who works with me here, who's my older cousin, he's our distribution manager, is always telling me that like younger cousins, since he was the one that everyone looked up to, are calling and are like, hey, what is that business actually going the way that it seems that it's going, and blah blah blah, is that real? And it's like, yep, it really is. We really we really did it after 5 or 6 years or whatever. So I think so. I mean, nothing crazy, but it's a crazy industry to be in. It's like if somebody told me that whatever, they're setting up some casino or something somewhere, I'd be very curious to hear about it.
Nick, I really do appreciate you being generous with your time. Is there anything else that you want to make sure the CEN audience, our viewers and readers, know about yourself or Naturae?
No, I mean, I guess just, if you're in New York, go buy some Jaunty and resonators. We are the soul of the company is very equipment focused, as you can hear. It's kind of a lot of what we talk about here. And I mean, no, thank you for the time. This was super fun. I don't often get this great of a chemistry, so I thought it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate your feedback. And if there is one, where's your top dispensary in New York?
Let's say Housing Works in New York City. Housing Works is definitely the top in New York City. Then if you're in Capital Region, it would be Upstate Canico. They're in Schenectady. They're awesome store. I mean, they're crushing it. And then in Western New York, in Syracuse, you should go to Flintstone if you're over there. Flintstone is an unbelievable dispensary. I mean, it honestly puts a lot of West Coast dispensaries to shame. It's a really cool place.
Excellent. I look forward to the next time I'm in the state. But Nick, thank you again, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. All right.
Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast. In the subject line, you can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Nicolas Guarino, founder and CEO of Naturae, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.